now. Well, welcome everyone to our third session of Christianity Explored online, as we're learning how to apply and train and equip each other for taking the gospel through the Christianity Explored series into our homes and into other people's homes through online presence. Today we're going to focus on a couple of things. Let me share a screen with you, but before we do, I am going to have Peter pray for our time. So why don't you pray for our time together?
Let's pray. Father, we are grateful always for the opportunity to learn more about how we can clearly and effectively communicate the good news of Christ. And we're grateful for Kevin and Randy with us here today to give us, share with us some things that they have found helpful and effective. And we ask that you'll just be with them, guide them as they share and as they lead and facilitate. And as we discuss how we can use questions as a way to facilitate discussion at our tables in a way that is effective and fruitful and caring and loving and sensitive too. So we ask for that help today in Christ's name. Amen.
Amen. Amen.
Thank you, Peter. I'm learning gradually here how to use this system after too many meetings with Zoom. So we have learned actually how to share the screen right, and hopefully we'll have the audio right. So let me tell you where we're heading today as we continue to want to train the church family to love, live, and tell the good news. And what we mean by that, again, is to equip the local church in its mission of evangelism. And so that's our heart with Christianity Explored, and we hope that's your heart as well. We assume it is. That's why you're here. So today, as we continue this series, we're looking at using questions with Christianity Explored online. We'll introduce Randy later, but as many of you know, he wrote the book Questioning Evangelism, and it's on using questions. It's not about questioning evangelism. And so we will talk about how you can use questions and why they're actually, I'm assuming he's going to talk about this, but why they're especially important in these online environments to use good questions. We're going to go through a sample evening. I think that's one thing you guys asked. What does a sample session look like? What does it look like online? We'll look at some best practices even before we get Randy going on that. And then we'll leave you with getting our expectations straight. And really what that is how you can use Christianity Explored online as we're doing it now and building a foundation even in your own church for building an evangelism ministry for the long term. Because as nice as it is to do things online, it's not the perfect setting. It's still better to sit across the table with a meal and with a cup of coffee and have the time stretched out. Things are more condensed. It's not quite as personal. But as you guys are going through this, you'll be more equipped for that. And then, again, any of the question and answers you might have from that. So this will be a review for just about everyone. So I'm just going to go through this quickly for those who are watching online and may have skipped one of the first two video series. Along those lines, the first two webinars are on the Christianity Explored North America YouTube site. And you can download those and watch yourself on them, for those of you who are on there, and say, man, maybe I should change my background like Dave. Oh, he went back to L.A. Good job, David. Good job. He's no longer in London. That was a quick transition. And you can see what you look like. But before the series, invite people. The best way always to get people there is not to depend on great social media campaigns. It might get one or two people, but it's the people you invite personally and make those connections are always the best. Get to know Mark's Gospel. Get to know the handbook, which we just sent you on the chat line, and get to know the films. Watch them ahead of time. Again, all the films are available through the end of June on the Christianity Explored YouTube channel. The handbook is there, and Mark's Gospel is found in your Bible, in case you're wondering. So that's where you find that. Get to know your fellow leaders so you can ask each other, hey, how did it go? How can I pray for you? I think when I was running this on a regular basis at our church in Colorado, I think the most encouraging thing for me was to have that time where our different leaders would visit and be able to pray for one another, because even if you're at a table where things aren't necessarily going well, you can rejoice with those who are. And you also know what's going on at those tables, know how to pray. Because there'll be times where you might have only Christians at your table, but you can know and how to pray for those who are at the table next to you. So in your case, pray for the other Zoom meetings taking place across Phoenix and across the U.S. Prepare for difficult questions. And I think Randy will help us for that a little bit today. He'll tell you how you can prepare for those by asking your own. But most importantly, as we hit the last couple of weeks, spend time in prayer. If this is God's role to open blind eyes and something we can't do, we need to be going before His throne and coming before Him for the lost and for our own hearts in this. So spend time in prayer. Some resources and best practices. Resources, again, the Christianity Explored videos are at YouTube. The leaders area, which we'll highlight here in a second, is christianityexplored.us. Our CE training online, the first two sessions are at explored.live/CE YouTube. And the Good Book Company has several good resources. It has an electronic copy of the Participant's Handbook that looks like this. They have it on sale right now. And so that might be a good way to get it either in Kindle or PDF or something like that. They also have, if you could ask God one question, it's a free book right now, a great Christianity Explored resource. If you could ask God one question. And I'm sure these are the questions that Randy is not addressing. He's not talking about asking God questions. So that'll be good. We welcome that opportunity for you to go to the Good Book Company and get those as well. The Christianity Explored leaders area is christianityexplored.us. We hopefully were able to, actually, if anyone wanted to get registered, I'm not sure if you needed that last week. We did take your feedback forms, and we appreciate that. I'm not sure we asked if you wanted to be registered. If I come up with a follow-up for today for you and you want to be registered on the leader site, I'll put that on there, and we will get you direct access to the Christianity Explored leader site. Okay, let me hand things over to Randy. Randy is the author of Bringing the Gospel Home, about talking about Christ with your family members. Speaking, there's with Jewish people. What's the name of that one, Randy?
Engaging with Jewish people.
Engaging, that was the word I'm looking for. Engaging with Jewish people, a great book in that context as well. And of course, Questioning Evangelism. And he is a Christianity Explored coach for us. And so it is, and just a great friend. So let's hand things over to Randy. There'll be a notes package. You'll see an outline of where he's going. I'll bring that up for you so you can see where he's going. And Randy, let me know if you want me to keep this notes package on the screen once I get it up here. Give me just a second. I just had it here. Recent. If you want it on throughout your talk, I can keep it there.
Well, it doesn't matter to me. I think it's more up to everybody else. I mean, I have my notes on paper, so would it be helpful for you to have that there?
Hold on here.
They're saying yes, kind of, sort of.
Well,
then I'm gonna,
yes.
Randy and Kevin, we have the notes packet that you've sent to us, so we can have that opened up.
I'll put this on for people later on who might be watching this. You can have that open up, and you'll still see Randy there. So, and so that will be good. So I'm going to mute myself, and I'll try to move down the screen as Randy moves on this. So, so here's some stuff. Randy, take it away.
Well, thanks. Great to be with you all. I consider this a great privilege. I've been looking forward to it. Perhaps I should tell you a little bit about how I got to this point where questions were such a big deal for me, and why I think the Lord has been using this and blessing it in ministry training things. As you might guess from the title of the book that Kevin mentioned, Engaging with Jewish People, I wrote a book on Jewish evangelism. And I come from a Jewish background. I became a Christian when I was 20 years old as a sophomore in college. But I grew up in a Jewish home in suburbs of New York City, very culturally Jewish, not so much spiritually. But in Jewish culture, questions are a very big deal. And you answer questions with a question more often than you answer it with an answer. I remember one time asking my grandmother, how was the weather? And she said, how could the weather be in Florida? And I asked my uncle how he was doing. He said, compared to who? And I asked another relative, how was their family? They said, why do you ask? So it's a very, very Jewish thing to do, to answer questions with questions. If you ever watch reruns of Seinfeld, it's amazing how many of his jokes are a question, not a statement. So I used to teach these seminars for college students on how to witness to Jewish people, and I did these in churches too. And I would say that answering a question with a question is a very good idea, and asking questions to draw people out is a good idea. And more people started coming up to me and they said, you know, that's true, not just for Jewish people, but lots of people engage very well. And so I started thinking about it, and I started seeing that it's not really just or primarily a cultural thing. It's a very human thing. And then I started studying questions in the Bible, and it was amazing how many times the prophets made their point by asking a question. You may remember, you know, Isaiah, have you not heard? Have you not seen? Certainly God's 70 plus responses to Job were questions. And so I started wrestling with how Jesus responded to questions. And I found that quite often, maybe half the time, he didn't answer a question with an answer. He answered a question with a question. And so I started wrestling with that. What was that like? And I started experimenting and using it more in campus evangelism, where I was at the time. And then that eventually became the book. And so I've been thinking about it quite a bit ever since. And I think it really works very, very well in Bible study. It works very well in evangelism. And so it certainly works very well in Christianity Explored, which is a Bible study for the sake of evangelism. So, and by the way, I'll pause at wherever if you need to ask questions. I think there's some sort of function where you could raise your hand, but it's probably better if you don't do that, if you just kind of wave or something, because I'm not so sure I'd see the raised hand kind of thing. But so let me start by asking a question. What happens when I ask you a question? Or what goes on inside you when someone asks you a question? Now I'm kind of asking it rhetorically, but I'm hoping that when I asked a question, didn't it just start you thinking about, well, how would I answer that? Or what is the answer to that? When someone asks you a question, it engages you in the answering process. You become more active, a more active participant. When I just tell you things, it's easy for you not to really be engaged. You sort of watch it at a distance and, well, let me see how he handles this thing, or let's see how this guy goes. But if I say, what does a question do that a statement doesn't do? Your mind, I think, is already going in, okay, what does a question do? What does a statement do? What's different about it? Which one is better? Which one do you think is better for involving people in the exploring of the gospel process? So I think what questions do is they engage people in the answering process. Excuse me. I'm going to need to pause every so often for sips of water, because that's just the reality. So let me ask if you have any questions so far. Oh, how sad. Okay, so
why do you ask?
Most of the reason that I asked was to give my voice a rest. And so that didn't work. I want to say a couple of things under this category of what do questions do. I've already tried to say they engage people in the answering process. They involve people in the discussion as a participant instead of as an observer or as an audience. They can also expose an attitude or an assumption or an objection that people have. A question sometimes can show people that maybe they're not so sincere, or maybe they're not really taking this seriously. And that can be very, very helpful and important in evangelism. Now, I think if people show up to a Christianity Explored event, they already have a pretty high level of interest. That's why they came, even if it's coming online on Zoom. So you probably don't have a high percentage of people who are resistant, but I think we can assume that there's some level of resistance, and a question can help draw that out. And a question not only exposes objections, but it can also diffuse them or dissipate them. So the classic example is in the Gospel of Mark, I believe it's chapter 10, where the man comes to Jesus and says, good teacher, what must I do to inherit eternal life? Remember this? I'm sure you do. And very often I think about this and I think, boy, the disciples must have thought this was just like the best setup question ever. Good teacher, what must I do to inherit eternal life? They're thinking, Jesus, take out the booklet, show them the 4-point outline, take out the flip chart, show them the gospel plan. And surely this was like the perfect setup, but you remember, I'm sure, what Jesus said. The guy said, good teacher, what must I do to inherit eternal life? What did he say? Now's your chance to answer.
Why do you call me good teacher?
Yeah, he said, why do you call me good? And of course, now I anticipate the disciples were thinking, oh no, he blew it. It was like, that's like the perfect setup, and he blew it. But you read the rest of that dialogue and you realize what Jesus was doing. The reason he asked a question was he wanted to expose to the man that his question really wasn't a sincere inquiry to get input from Jesus. It was an attempt for him to justify himself. Because when Jesus asked some questions, or when Jesus stated some commandments, the man said, I've kept all these things since I was a youth. In other words, when the guy said, good teacher, what must I do to inherit eternal life? He already thought he had it. He already thought he did have it. He didn't need anything else. And he wanted to be validated or affirmed by Jesus. But Jesus, by asking a question, exposed the fact that the man wasn't really as righteous as he thought he was. By the way, there's a really crucial phrase in Mark's account of this interchange that's not in Matthew's, and it may also be in Luke. But in Mark's account, it says that Jesus looked at the man and loved him. And that the verb that he looked at him, it's a word that's used rarely in the New Testament and implies a seeing into in a very deep kind of way. Jesus looked at the man and loved him. And so sometimes our statements about how to ask questions, how to ask good questions, or what questions to ask can be interpreted as how to win an argument, or how to defeat your enemy, or how to put down disagreement. But that's not what we're trying to do. What we're trying to do is we're trying to love people, and we love them enough to make them uncomfortable by asking questions. Sometimes it is a tremendously loving thing to do to help people see that things are not as good and as together in their lives as they thought. Now that makes them very uncomfortable and maybe even sends them away sad. That's the phrase that's used about this man in Mark chapter 10. But questions can engage, but also soften. So again, questions so far?
Makes sense so far. How's that?
Good. That is good to hear. Um, just as an illustration, which might take a very long time, but we have time, right? Um, some of you may know that my name, Randy Newman, is the same name as the guy who wrote the music to Toy Story, and the guy who wrote the theme to Monk, TV show Monk. Did you all know that, by the way? Is that okay? No?
Songwriter, yeah.
Okay, so the music to Toy Story, You've Got a Friend in Me, song written by Randy Newman. He won the Academy Award for that. For a while, I had a website, randydavidnewman.com, and I still have it. And I used to get a pretty steady stream of people coming to my website who thought I was the other Randy Newman. That stream has kind of trickled, but I still get some every so often. And people say, you know, I love your music. I love Toy Story. Some people send me audios of songs they've written, hoping that I could get them published or recorded somewhere. One guy invited me to his daughter's wedding to sing You've Got a Friend in Me. He told me he was a man of means and could make it worth my while. So I told him yes. And but then I felt the need to tell him the rest, and so it never happened. But so I got an email just about a month ago, maybe 6 weeks ago, by a guy who thought I was the guy who wrote the music to Monk. And when I told him, by the way, I started getting this so often, I came up with a standard response, and I thought I would use it for evangelism, and I copy it and paste it and send it back to people. But it's something like, if you take a closer look at my website, you'll see that I'm a different Randy Newman than the one you're looking for. I'm not the guy who wrote the music to Toy Story. I try to help people with a different story, how their story can connect to God's story. If I could be helpful for you in that way, please let me know. And most people never write back. A few say, oops, sorry, my bad, and then I never hear from them. But a few have written lengthy treatises of their religious views. And so this guy 5 or 6 weeks ago, engaged, and he tells me he's an atheist and he has all sorts of questions. And it turned out that, well, actually, I'll tell you, at first, I just thought, oh, I don't know if I really have time for this. This guy's kind of bothering me. Sounds like kind of a wise guy. And then this horrible thought occurred that, first of all, I was trying all sorts of these techniques in response to him, techniques that I've taught about answering questions with questions and asking and challenging and all this kind of stuff. And it really wasn't going very well at all. And then I had this horrible realization that I was just trying to get rid of the guy. I really wasn't trying to witness to him. And I also realized I hadn't prayed at all for him. And I thought, now, I probably should never admit this, but I just did. So so I started praying for him, and I started praying for God to give me wisdom about what to say. And there was a pretty dramatic change in a very, very good way. And I got the idea that he was really quite open, or at least he was open to discussing things. And we had, a lot of things back and forth. And then one day, kind of out of nowhere, he just throws out this sarcastic email. He has a bunch of different ideas, and he says, oh, so here's something Christians need to think about. How come there's so much division among Christianity? Why are there so many different kinds of Christianity? He's a scientist in the field of quantum mechanics. He said there aren't different kinds of quantum mechanics. There's not different kinds of chemistry. There's not different kinds of geography. Why are there so many different kinds of Christianity? And I felt like at that point I had developed a close enough rapport with him that I could call him out on what seemed like an insincere or a disrespectful question. So I wrote back to him and I said, are you telling me that there aren't any kind of disagreements in the field of quantum mechanics, or any disagreements in chemistry, or whatever the other field was that he mentioned? I said, are you telling me that in the academy, the academic settings, there aren't different perspectives and disagreements about things? I said, I'm surprised to hear such a silly question. No, I said, simplistic question from someone as learned as you are. Was that a sincere question, or were you just taking a jab at me? And again, I felt like I had developed enough rapport where I could be that pointed. Let me first interrupt and say, I realize I'm from New York and I'm Jewish. And you may have to translate everything I say to Arizona Gentile or California Gentile or wherever you're from. I don't know. But even apart from my New York Jewishness, I felt like that was justified. And he wrote me back this email of, I am so sorry. You're exactly right. That wasn't fair. I didn't mean to sound disrespectful. I really am enjoying our interchange. You're exactly right that there are disagreements within the academic communities of this and this and this. And just because there's disagreement doesn't mean that we disagree at the core stuff. He says, I guess that's what you're saying about Christianity, and that really makes sense. Thank you. He even thanked me. I thought, this is really great. So we've had a very, very good conversation since then. And he even came to a Zoom online Passover Seder that my brother hosted and that I participated in. And we've had this thing back and forth now about Judaism and Christianity. So all of that was a long excursus to say, sometimes a question can expose an insincere motive, or it could actually engage and draw people in closer into relationships. So all that to say is sometimes...
Randy?
Oh,
so
yes.
Along those lines, I think to flow out of what you were just saying about the rich young ruler, although sometimes we might be tentative to ask questions because we might come across as unloving, it could be the most loving thing we can do because it shows some interest in them. And I'm assuming I'd love you to expound a little bit more on Jesus loving the rich young ruler. He loved him before this, before, not just afterwards. He loved him before. So what does that look like in the fact that he chose to really engage this rich young ruler with questions?
Right. So I think we tend to think that what it means to love people is just affirmation, saying nice things, not ruffling the feathers. And especially in our current culture, it seems like the only way you can disagree with people or the only way you can challenge people must be harsh and insulting. And that's terrible because that's not the only way to challenge people. And sometimes, by far, the most loving thing you can do is disagree or ask someone, now, what was it that made you say that? Or how did you come to that? And what you're doing is you're making a decision that, yes, this is going to be uncomfortable, but I have a higher priority than being comfortable. There's a priority for truth and God's glory more important than my comfort or their comfort. Again, we don't want to do it in disrespectful or unloving ways, but we can challenge and we can ask. So I don't know if that's along the lines. I think asking people a question and challenging them may be more helpful because it engages and it also involves and it exposes. So all of that was under what questions do. It also kind of spills over to the second thing about ways questions work. What questions do, ways questions work. Oh, my screen is changing. Kevin just did something to my screen. I'm going to believe that his motives were good, and I'm just going to keep going. Oh wait, okay, that's better. By the way, it appears that we've lost people already. I didn't. Usually, I don't lose people quite so quickly. They usually stick around for more than this. But did I say something like really offensive or something? Or
You're good.
oh, okay.
Hey,
Right.
I should have mentioned, Randy, one of the guys from Foothills and here in Phoenix had to drop off for 30 minutes to do some work-related things, and he'll be back on here in about 30 minutes. So he's not offended.
All right. So here's what I wanted to say under this thing about ways questions work. I mean, there's a whole lot we can say, but what I wanted to zoom in on is they can shut down or they can open up. They can shut people down or open them up. They can shut down conversation or they can open people up. So some questions, if they're too pointed or they're too limiting, they can just shut down. So, I mean, the worst would be the question, well, don't you agree? not only is that bad because it's just a yes or no question, but it's sort of tilting and pointing things in the direction of, you really should agree with me, shouldn't you? So you want to try to avoid yes or no questions, or very, very limiting questions, because they shut people down and they shut discussion down, but opening up. So just like, and by the way, just try to think ahead of time and anticipate questions and ask, okay, is this a question that's likely to draw out lots of discussion and get lots of people involved? Or is this a question that only has one right answer that just gets one person saying just one thing? And one minor tweak that you can make is, instead of asking, what is your favorite, whatever it is, but ask, what are some of your favorites? So when you say, what's your favorite television show? So my favorite. Well, I mean, it's like, well, I guess it depends on when it is. I was like, I don't know. Well, that it used to be, I don't know. And so what happens is people end up saying nothing. But if it's, well, so what are some favorite things you like to watch? And it just gets the discussion going. So again, you're just trying to not be limited in your question, but you want to ask questions in ways that open up and get things flowing. By the way, a couple of thoughts about what I'm saying. I think I would say, whether it's preparing to lead a small group Bible study with believers, or lead a table-sized discussion at Christianity Explored with believers and non-believers, or whether it's online. But it's worth reflecting on. I can tell you that asking questions in an online Zoom setting may be more important and more helpful than being in person, but it may be more difficult. Maybe more important, but it may be more difficult. It's more important because if you're just talking and you're doing all of the talking, people will have a very hard time engaging and being involved in the thinking process. And with this screen, it makes it even more difficult for them to be involved. So a question is more important, but asking questions online by Zoom is difficult, because it's really hard to know what people are thinking and how they're thinking. You don't know whether they heard what you just said or whether there's a delay. It's very difficult to read people's facial expressions. So I would encourage you to try to think ahead of time of, what are some questions I could ask? Try to do a little evaluating. Is this going to be a good question that stimulates discussion or not? And then the other thing is, you may want to think of, well, what are 2 or 3 other ways I could ask the same question? Because you may ask the question and it just goes nowhere, and say, well, Farrah, let me try that from another angle, or let me try to reword that. So it's worth anticipating that you may need 2 or 3 questions for each one question you're actually trying to ask. And then the other thing is, you have to pause a lot, which is something I'm not modeling at all. But you need to pause when you ask a question, because people are kind of reluctant. Do I say something? Don't I say something? If we were all in the same room, you all kind of, you just sort of know who's moving toward answering or whatever. But on Zoom, you don't. So you ask the question and you have to patiently pause a little longer, as I'm going to try to do right now. Like, does that make sense?
This is it does make sense. And I wanted to say that I agree. I lead small group for women's Bible study, and I've had to learn how to embrace the awkward of like quiet. And that's almost times 100 in a digital sense. You kind of have to embrace the awkward for a little while and be okay with sitting in that awkwardness.
Yes, great. Thank you. So let's try to think a little bit. What might be some other ways of thinking of it? Embrace the awkwardness. What might be some other ways to think about that to help us with this online challenge? And that's for anybody.
Have you found it to, and I'm not sure exactly your exposure on online, Zoom, Bible studies, or anything for that matter, but have you found it to be more helpful to ask a question, but maybe to direct it to 2 or 3 people out of a 10 group setting, rather than to ask it in general out loud for everyone?
Yeah, I think you want to mix it up. And you're right. Asking a specific person or a couple of different people, if you can't ask all of your questions to everybody, because very few people will respond, and there will be some people who never respond. So you do need to. It can be a very good strategy to say, Dave, what do you think about that? You might want to preface it at the beginning or somewhere toward the beginning to say, listen, I know that this Zoom situation is a little bit limiting and difficult, so I'm going to try to call on some people every so often, just individually. And just don't be surprised if I do that, and I hope that's okay. And so that can reduce some of the difficulty or the awkwardness.
Yeah.
I don't know how many of you deal with multi-ethnic situations, but some ethnicities are more prone to speak up than others. I used to teach a staff team Bible study. Half of our team was made up of Asians and half were non-Asians. And the Asians never answered a thing that I asked, nothing. Until one of the guys approached me after several weeks. He said, listen, we're just not going to speak up unless you call on us. In our culture, culturally speaking, it's disrespectful for us to just jump in without being invited in. And even though you asked the question to everybody, we're going to hold back. He said, by the way, we're all sitting here appalled at all of you white non-Asians who just jump in. I mean, you guys, you even start answering questions before the questions finished being asked. So I thought, oh, so I need to call on people individually. I said, won't that make them feel awkward? No, actually, that's a kind of cultural expression of respect. I respect your opinion and I want to hear it. But they're probably not going to chime in unless you invite them. So I don't know your settings. And having just said that, I imagine there might be plenty of Asian people who would say, no, that's not true of all Asians. Probably not. So you need to kind of find out. And that is very, very difficult in an online environment. So
I think one of the things when I engage students and people on campus, I think questions are important because most of the time, at least, and I see it here, getting to know you questions, for us, it's about building those relationships. And most people, if they're going to talk, they're going to talk about themselves. And so I find asking them questions about themselves and their worldview, their background, their beliefs, usually gets them engaged and talking enough that they're then more willing to engage in questions that I may have about faith and what I believe.
absolutely.
So that's why I think questions are important.
Yep. Very good. And for some people, they can actually help people figure out what they believe that they may not know. So you ask a question and they start talking, and it's as they're talking, they go, oh, wait a minute. No, I don't, that's not right. I don't believe that. Or you ask a question and they've never really thought of, do you believe your idea of God? Is it a personal God or is it more like an impersonal force? I never thought of that. And so you help people figure out what they believe or what they don't believe or what they don't know. I have to think that is a very important part of that whole amazing drama where Jesus says, who do people say that I am? So it's like it was a two-stage asking. Who do people say that I am? Well, there's this, and there's a. Who do you say that I am? Oh, boom. It wasn't just for Jesus declaring to the crowd. It was to clarify the thinking of where he was asking this question. All right, so let me move on to different kinds of questions. I think I've listed 5 there, right? So it's good to categorize them and then think of sort of choosing out of a certain category for a certain stage in a conversation. So I'm moving from I don't know this person at all, I'm trying to get to know them, to the most intimate of questions of in an invitation to become a Christian. Are you ready to become a Christian now? So I'm moving from the very beginning of the process to hopefully the culmination of it. The getting to know you questions, well, let's brainstorm. In other words, wouldn't it be good for me to involve you all? So what are some getting to know you questions? Like, for example, in case you're wondering what I mean, where are you from? So what are some others?
What's your name?
Helpful.
Yeah, and I good. Yeah, that would be a very good starting place.
What do you do for a living?
Mm-hmm.
Tell me about your family.
There you go.
So I'm gonna jump in the deep end. This may not be the best one, but on our campuses these days, and you'll know this, like one of the groups that are the most active is the LGBTQ plus group. And so I was on campus one day, and I went up to a table that was full of LGBTQ plus sorority. That's what it was. And I simply talked to a young person who is gender binary. And I asked her this question. I said, how does a straight white Christian male interact with you? And her response was, wow, no one's asked me that before. Carefully. I said, okay, I'll do that.
Yeah. So the setting itself narrows the scope of the conversation. The very fact that the person is standing at a table outside at a campus, I assume there's some sort of a sign, which is basically saying, come up to our table to get to know us and our organization and see if we would have something to say to you. So just the setting itself already focuses things, so that your question, I think, is an appropriate one. But there were a lot of things that narrowed it before you even said anything.
Absolutely.
So again, it's, yes, that is a getting to know you question, but it's probably not the kind of thing you're going to start with at a Christianity Explored table or on an online thing, or just as you're getting to know somebody. So you want to have some getting to know you questions in your mind, and then you can get a lot of traction in a conversation by following up what they say by asking them more questions to draw them out more. When I do this training in a group with people, I pair people up and I have them practice a listening exercise where one person talks about themselves or whatever they want to talk about. The other person can only ask questions, so that it's a very one-sided or one-direction conversation. A lot of conversations are more like ping pong matches, going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And what I'm trying to say is sometimes if we can ask more questions, we're keeping the attention over on them a little bit longer. So rather than they talk, I talk, they talk, I talk, it's more like they talk, I ask them to talk some more. They talk, I ask them a question that draws them out more. And so the spotlight, so to speak, is on their side of the stage rather than bouncing back and forth. So that's a a device, again, I think of showing love and concern for someone. You're asking getting to know you questions, but then you're drawing out a little further and going a little bit deeper. So I find that the second category, the start of evangelism conversation questions, can flow at almost seemingly as just part of the getting to know you process. So I get to know where you're from, tell me about your family, what kind of things you like to do, what are some of your hobbies, do you like to read books, what do you like to read, do you watch movies, what are some of your favorite movies, and then seemingly just part of that is, well, how about spiritual things? Do you ever think much about spiritual stuff? Do you come from any kind of a religious background? How has that shaped who you are? What part, if any, has God played in your life up to this point? If someone were to say life is a spiritual journey, where would you say you're at in that journey? So I'm trying to give you a whole lot of examples of category B, start of evangelism conversation questions. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I was actually going to ask, like, is, what's your experience with church or God been like in your life? But I guess that would be a category B question, not a category A question.
Well, but yes, but as you see, I'm trying to say A should flow into B.
Right. It would be like a later A question almost.
Yes.
Yeah.
By the way, Katie, is there a reason that I can't see you other than your name?
My kids are here. I just don't want them to be distracting.
I got you. Okay, good. Okay, I just didn't know whether. Anyway, so good. So I happen to think. Well, I received some training in evangelism quite a long time ago, where I was encouraged to ask one of these start of evangelism conversation questions right away or very, very early in the conversation. And that always seemed a little weird to me, and it seemed even weirder to the person I was asking. So, if you were to die tonight, how sure are you that you go to heaven? It's a good question, but it's pretty pointed. I mean, it's jumping into the deep end of the pool. So I think I prefer, let's get to know people and find out about them. A lot of times, as you get to know people, you may hear things that they say, which then paves the way for a start of a gospel conversation so much more naturally, rather than if you were to die tonight kind of questions. I don't know how well I'll be able to do this on a screen here, but one of the things I do in a lot of my evangelism training is I try to tell people to, if you can imagine a spectrum. I don't know which way things go backwards on this screen.
Your right hand is A. Your right hand is A.
My right hand is A. Thank you. Very good. Okay, so imagine the alphabet written between here and here, A to Z, right? And am I going the right way? Yes. So I tend to think of this A to Z spectrum as a spectrum of unbelief. So Z is an unbeliever, but they're really, really close to becoming a Christian. And A is someone really far away from God. They're like a very angry atheist. So Z, the person that you get to know the person, you find out about all sorts of things, and the appropriate Z question is, sounds like you're ready to become a Christian right now. Are you ready to become a Christian right now? Yes. Okay. Hallelujah. But A is, don't even talk to me about God or I'll hit you. All right. So it used to be a lot of people in our culture already were somewhere over like letter T. And an evangelistic conversation could start with, how sure are you, if you were to die tonight, how sure are you that you go to heaven? But today, many people are further back. Now, not all that many people are angry atheists, but a lot of people call themselves atheists. And there's just a whole lot more people over here. So I think we need more of a gradual, or at least less of an assuming part of the starting point. So do you ever think much about spiritual stuff? And if so, well, like what What difference has that ever made in your life, or is it making in your life now? Now, you ask that question, you may find out that they are at letter Z. Oh, I've been thinking about it all the time. Well, then, okay. But we need to be assuming a further starting point, further away, and move gradually if to make more, I don't know, relevance for the people we're talking to. So again, the kinds of people who show up for a Christianity Explored meeting in person or on Zoom, I would think they could be anywhere on that A to Z spectrum, and you want to find out where they are. And your challenge as a leader is to kind of draw people out and ask questions that are appropriate for their different levels of openness or where they are. So, do I need to clarify any of that? Does that make sense?
Randy, I think that's helpful. Thank you.
So maybe this fits under the one size does not fit all. Maybe it's we should assume nothing and be really, really good at listening. And so that's the getting to know you questions and the start of an evangelistic conversation. The next category I have there is clarifying questions, and there's a whole host of these kinds of things, but my guess is that you already know this or that you already do these kind of things. So it's like, so now tell me more about that, or what do you mean by that? Or you just use this word. How are you using that word? You just said that you're spiritual but not religious. Tell me more about that. Or what do you mean by spiritual? Or how are those two things different, spiritual and religious? So it's just clarifying, drawing them out more. What has convinced you of that? Or how have you come to that conclusion? Or who has shaped your thinking on that? By the way, I would try to use questions that begin with the word why rather sparingly. So how have you come to that? What has convinced you of that? Feels less threatening than why do you believe that? You feel the difference in that? Why questions sometimes can make people feel like you've put them on the spot or you're backing them into a corner. So those are clarifying questions. And again, as a small group leader or a discussion group leader, just spending some time brainstorming of some different kinds of questions. By the way, the more you can prepare and just sort of jot down a bunch of different kinds of questions, the better equipped you'll be. Very, very few people are brilliant on the spot with this kind of thing. But I find that it's not all that difficult of a skill to develop. You just get the mindset of, oh, let me try to brainstorm a half a dozen different ways to ask that same question, or let me try to think of some new questions to ask people to get them talking about themselves.
Yeah, along those lines, that's where, going back to the more familiar you are with the Christianity Explored Handbook and the questions that you are already prepared, allow you to start thinking, okay, what would be a good follow-up question to this one? Also, the more questions you're asking, you can start thinking, oh, based on someone's answer, is there a better follow-up question? Is there a better clarifying question? And so it all goes together in that regard. So thank you.
So let's move on to, let's skip challenging questions for just a second and just to jump to invitation to become a Christian questions. You want to just think through when people are ready to become a Christian, and it's probably when you're having a one-on-one conversation with them. You don't want to be making up new things at that point. You want to be prepared of how would I invite someone to become a Christian? That's when it becomes obvious that they're ready. You don't want to have to then go through your theology of what do I believe about that. So you want to prepare beforehand with things like, would you like to become a Christian right now? Or sometimes the way people express becoming a Christian is through a prayer, and they simply tell God they want to believe in Him and trust in Him and believe that what Jesus did for them is what they are embracing. Are you ready to pray that kind of prayer? I could pray a prayer and you could pray it, you could follow it with me. So you just, again, you don't want to be making this up. You want to have this thought through of how would you help someone cross that line from darkness to light. And I realize there's a million theological questions that you want to wrestle with and decide where you land on some of those theological discussions. So that's, again, those are questions you want to anticipate beforehand. But let's talk about challenging questions. And I realize I'm running out of time. Challenging questions.
Take as much time as you need.
Okay. So this is where someone says something and you want to help them move toward understanding, but you may need to challenge them. So when I asked that atheist friend of mine that I met online, is that a real question, or were you taking a jab at me? That was a challenging question. So let me offer a couple of challenging questions and then hope that just sparks ideas about how you could do this. My favorite challenging question is the one-word question, really? And you have to be careful how you ask that so it doesn't sound obnoxious. But if people say things that sound like they're taking a shot at you or a jab, or they're saying something that just really doesn't make sense. So if they say, for example, well, I think it doesn't matter what you believe. I think you believe anything you want. It doesn't really matter. Let people should be free to believe anything they want. Well, that's terrible. But I don't think you should say that's terrible. I think asking a question can help set the person free from that shallow kind of thinking and say, really? Do you really believe that? You really think it's okay to believe anything? Well, no, probably not anything. Oh, okay. So how, and see, all of a sudden it's a whole different discussion. People like superficial, tweet level, bumper sticker level thought. And a question can help set them free from such shallowness. So if they say something that's really silly, like, people believe anything, it doesn't matter what you believe. Oh, really? So that's one kind of challenging question. Another kind of challenging question is where you turn the question back on them. Or if they ask a question, you turn it back on them. So or it doesn't have to be a question that they say. They could make a statement or they could ask a question. You turn it back on them. So they say, for example, I just think, I think all religions are basically the same. I think all religions really at their core are saying the same thing. Well, a question where you turn it back on them, it can be very helpful for getting them to think more deeply. And so a question like, well, can you explain that to me? I don't see how Buddhism and Judaism are saying the same thing. Can you help me understand that? That's a challenge question that gets them wrestling of something they said that's actually kind of foolish. So that's another kind of challenging question. So again, I would encourage you to brainstorm a bunch of different kinds of challenging questions where you're disagreeing with them, but instead of well to that
Hopefully
kind of
he'll be
stuff.
back. You froze up there, Randy.
I'm sorry?
You froze up. You froze up right after you said you're disagreeing with them, but instead, and then you froze up.
Sorry, am I back?
Yes, you're back.
Okay. So rather than being a direct disagreement, you're wrong, here's why you're wrong, instead it's, well, can you explain that to me? Or, now that's interesting, but isn't it possible that, and now you're presenting a different point of view, isn't it possible that different religions agree on a lot of things, but they actually disagree on some pretty significant things? Or, so how did you come to that understanding? Or who has influenced your thinking on that? By the way, I again, going back to this guy I had this email conversation with, he sent me an email. He said, here's something I posted on an online discussion several years ago. The Old Testament is to Christianity as Demolition Derby is to opera. And I thought, I have no idea what this guy's talking about. Like, did he fall on his head? And what I thought was, based on previous conversations that we've had, I think he was saying the Old Testament Christianity has absolutely nothing to do with each other, just the same way Demolition Derby and opera have nothing to do with each other. And I'm thinking, well, no, that's totally wrong. You're misreading the Old Testament and the New Testament. You're totally wrong on this about both. But so I was tempted to start writing, well, no, I think you're misunderstanding the Old Testament and the New Testament. And, Jesus said that he came to fulfill. I mean, I had like hours worth of stuff there. But what I said, I asked him a question. I said, I'm sorry, I'm not understanding. Are you saying that the Old Testament has nothing to do with the New Testament the way Demolition Derby has nothing to do with opera? He goes, no, not at all. I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying that the two sides don't understand each other, and that the world of opera doesn't understand Demolition Derby, and Demolition Derby is like, oh, well, okay, so I might agree with that. But so that was my attempt to ask a clarifying question before disagreeing. Now, if he were to come back and say, yeah, that's what I'm saying, that they don't have anything to do with each other, I would say, well, now, how did you come to that? How did you come to that conclusion? A question challenges, but engages him in the thinking process. So, I've been doing a lot of talking. Do you have some questions about my questions? Are there things I could clarify?
I don't have any questions, but I just wanted to say that everything I'm hearing is really encouraging to me, because I know on our first day of training, like my big obstacle to evangelism is needing to know the answer to every question. And so knowing that sitting around a table or in a Zoom call in this setting, I am more equipped if I don't know the answer, and can engage in a dialogue to get there.
Yeah, and I'm really glad you brought that up, because I think your situation is shared by many Christians. Oh no, I've got to anticipate every question, and we should anticipate questions, and I've got to know the answer to every single question that people could possibly ask. Well, the more answers we have, I think the better we are. But I think we should assume that it's guaranteed we're going to be asked some questions that we don't know the answers to. Guaranteed. And so we need to be very ready with, well, that's good. I don't know. I got to think about that one, which shows a kind of respect and a humility toward the people we're talking to. But then the other thing is, theologically, I mean, I don't know where you're all at theologically, but I find it tremendously liberating when I remember, and boy, I don't remember it all the time, but when I remember that God is the one who orchestrates people's salvations. He's the one who's got the timetable figured out, and he's the one who's going to use and work and orchestrate and use us in the process. But it's not all up to me. He's the one working and drawing people in supernatural ways. So we ask God for wisdom. We ask God to know what to say and how to say it. But we're all the way through, we're trusting and remembering this is a supernatural process that God is working. Like, you remember what Jesus told Nicodemus, when someone's born again, it's like the wind. You don't know exactly where it's coming from or where it's going, but you know it's there. And so it is with someone when they're born again. By the way, it looks to me like Dave Kleinknecht has jumped into a lake. And
he came out of the lake. That's the amazing part.
He just walked out of the lake. It was like, wow. So sorry, sorry if I
trying to be like Jesus.
Yeah.
I got a baby back here that I'm holding.
That's lovely. That's really great. I'm sorry if I was,
Is he in one of those high-rise buildings behind you? Because it's impressive.
Okay. Other ways I can clarify things about questions. I probably need to go because I know Kevin has some things that he wants to cover, and it's past dinner time, but I'm hungry.
Well, Randy, thank you. And this is something we can always grow in more. And I think part of this is we just have to keep practicing it. The main reason I always bring Randy to do these trainings is every time he comes and does a training, I find myself for the next couple of days only asking questions to people around me. And it's a good practice to get into. And then I get into some bad habits of talking too much. And so then I have to bring Randy around again. And so it's a very healthy thing. So look at that. Dave is bringing the baby to the meeting.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Hey, Randy. So not to, it's going to sound like I'm brown-nosing a little bit, but we actually, as a state entity, so Christian Challenge Arizona, I'm on the state team for our ministry, and we always have our staff reading books on various topics, and so they get assigned to read it. Anyways, your book, Questioning Evangelism, is actually going to be our book that we're going to read as a state team this next season. So I've heard some good things about it, and I think we out here in the West, especially, I don't know I don't know how it is in the East. I know South's a little different, but we do lots of questions. It's part of our training when we do evangelism, because there are the worldview spectrum out here is so broad and so open-minded, if you will. And so questions are almost necessity just to get into a conversation. But we felt like your book was going to be a really good way to further dive into the quality and the type of questions. And so I'm looking forward to reading your book. And so there you go. So,
wow. Well, thank you. That's very encouraging to me. And you're in Arizona, is that what you said?
Correct. Yes.
Well, I think the Lord just spoke to me that you need to invite me to come out there and speak, especially like in January or February when it's freezing cold here. So
what I heard you say is you want to come out here in the middle of July. That's what I just heard.
Well, you may want to go see a hearing doctor, because July. So I do want to come visit there, assuming that someday we'll be able to travel more than just outside on my street. But I mean, that is encouraging to me, and I'm glad to hear it. That's good.
Good. Well, we would love to have you out here. So we'll see if we can make that happen. 2021, right? Feels like a long time away, but
yeah, no, I would love it. And speaking of helping, Kevin, feel free to share my email address with people, or maybe can I type it in on the? No, I probably won't. I don't know how to do that.
Type it in on the chat. Yeah,
I don't know if I'm. Wait, let's see. Oh, it does work. Okay, I'm going to type this in, but I can't talk and do that at the same time. But if I can be helpful to you after this by email, I'm more than happy to try to offer suggestions or whatever. Email's far better than texting or calling me, but I'd love to keep serving if that would be helpful.
Great, thanks, Randy. Good. My main takeaway from this is that you're willing to sing at any wedding. Is that what we're supposed to get from this?
That would be very bad for the people getting married.
Actually, what I heard is only if we are a person of means.
Well, that's true. Yeah. Wait.
I don't think he wants to sing at our weddings. There's not enough of this going around. I don't know.
Of all of the things for you to take away from this Zoom session, I went from being very encouraged to massively discouraged. The only thing they remembered was some silly comment I made. So, did you all get that all came through, the email?
It came through, yes. Yeah.
Thank you,
Randy, do be encouraged. We're just here to humble you at times, though. So but do be encouraged. Thank you for that. And we'll briefly just here go through this other part. I think what I'll do is, as we're going through how to run Christianity Explored online, let's make this as interactive as possible. I'm going to share my screen, but ask questions. We're just going to do this step by step. It's not going to be much of a lecture. We're gonna briefly go through this. So let me share the screen again.
I'm gonna say goodbye now, folks. See you.
Thanks, Randy.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
All right. As you share your screen, there is a place on that share screen thing on Zoom that you all have helped me with. It's the share computer sound. That is key if you're going to be showing videos through PowerPoint on Zoom. And so that should good. Well, okay. So we talked about this a little bit last week. Just to reiterate, the best way is probably to download the video from the leader site as opposed to embedding a YouTube link. If you have a YouTube link, you're streaming it twice, and that distorts it. But download the video from the leader site and then embed that in your PowerPoint. And so let me show you what that would look like in a video or in a PowerPoint. We talked about this just briefly last time. You can take the PDF, which I sent to you all, and copy that from Acrobat and just make a graphic out of it and put this in PowerPoint. And we'll try to do week 1 for you and send these to Cody, where you just happily have the questions there. So each week, if you have, I'm not sure if you have your handbook with you, but if you look at kind of an order of how an evening goes or how a session goes, normally you would begin with a meal. And you really build those relationships, can really use the get to know you questions that Randy was talking about in that environment. And that builds a foundation, because oftentimes people are not hearing what we're saying theologically, but they are realizing we're caring for them. So for instance, in week 1, the very first question right there's one question, and you put this on the screen by itself, is what's the best news you've ever heard? It's a very open-ended question. There's no right or wrong answer, but it gets people talking. And so this is where taking Katie's advice of allowing some awkward silence and letting people think of some of the greatest experiences. And, you know, in light of Randy's comment, you might want to rephrase that question. What are some of the best experience or best news, some of the best news things you've heard of? And that would be one. So you go to, from the Explore each week, a lot of times you're going to review the previous week. So and that's why I'm showing you week 3. In week 3 here on the screen, I'm going to highlight this. Discuss any question from last season or last session's follow-up. You send them back with a session to do with 6 or 7 questions for them to look at in Mark from the week before. And so you'll ask people, hey, have you had a chance to do the follow-up from last session? And if they say yes, you say, hey, what did you get from it? Any questions you might have? Encourage people to come back with their questions so that they're not intimidated if they don't know. In other words, they might say, I feel stupid if I got questions from the Bible. This is the place where they should feel like, you know, there is no dumb question. Feel free to ask those questions. So discuss any questions they have. And this is where you'll see, you know, you'll have people say, wow. I was talking to someone earlier this week as they were going through a study on 1 John with someone. And as they're going through it, someone stopped and said, you know, Jesus rose from the dead? I didn't realize that. It was just a passing comment that they'd only studied 1 John and a verse stood out. And so feel free for people to allow them, you want them to feel free to ask any question and to interact. And then following that, we would look at Mark chapter 2, verses 1 through 12. And we would look at that together in verse 3. And this is, or in session 3. And so Mark 2, 1 through 12, we'll have some questions, and we'll show you what those are. This is the 4 men who are lowering their disabled, crippled friend through the roof of the house so that he could meet Jesus. And so we're asking questions, and what you're trying to do in these times, and you're just putting the questions on the screen, what you're trying to do is break down the barrier between the text and the person. so that they can say, oh, the Bible is accessible. So they're going to see, oh, I see myself in the story. So you kind of say, hey, imagine if you were there in the home when the roof is being ripped open and this body is being dropped from the roof. What do you think that would have been like? That's a good question to start getting people into that. And then you say, okay, why would these 4 men have done that? Why was there a large crowd? And then what were the 4 men hoping Jesus would do? Now, the obvious answer is they want him to heal. And so you're getting people to come to their own conclusion on that, as opposed to you just saying, well, the 4 men wanted Jesus to heal. You want them to come to that answer. That's the purpose of these questions. Well, what does Jesus do instead? And so I'm going to ask you, you guys know the story. What did Jesus do instead of healing the crippled man?
Doesn't he forgive the sins?
Sins.
Yeah. Yeah, he offers to forgive sins. And then you can answer, why does he do that? Well, because that's more important. So you see where that leads to discussion. And so that tells you, okay, so forgiving sins is more important. At this point, we would show the video. And so I'm still in highlighter mode. That's now, you got to learn where to turn off the highlighter. Okay, I was just doing that. I'm going to try to play some of the video through this. We'll go a couple minutes. You saw this a little bit last week, but because I hit share computer sound, let me know how the sound is. If you go like this, I'll know to turn up the volume. If you're saying good, well, if you say this is good, okay, and or just talk to me and I'll pause it. So that way you can practice knowing how the sound is on this and how the video is, how the lips are. We'll review this in a minute.
When I started college in 1991, I joined the rugby club. It was quite competitive, so I was sent a strict summer training schedule, which I immediately put in the bin. Anyway, September rolled round, and I arrived for club testing and training, feeling fairly confident. When I got there, all the guys were very quiet, which was unusual. Then suddenly the coach came in and said, right, we'll start with the bleep test. The bleep test is a test where you run back and forth over 20 yards in time with a bleep that gets faster and faster. You run until you drop. In my case, that was not long in coming. I was the second to drop out, having collapsed and been physically sick. Next, we had to strip down to our shorts for the so-called fat test. Why not leave this part of the story to the imagination? Basically, the fat test is when your fat content is measured by this contraption that pinches the flesh all over your body. As it turned out, there was actually one other person who had an even higher percentage of body fat than me. We became firm friends. Well, flabby friends, really. The results of all these tests were recorded and publicly announced, and it was extreme.
Okay, so how was that? Did that work okay? Looks like it?
Yes.
How were the lips off too far? Was the
It was a bit choppy.
Okay?
It was a bit choppy. It wasn't smooth, but you could.
So
you know,
yeah. So if you can follow it, you'll have to decide for your own group. So this is a 13.5-minute video. The other option is send them via chat the link to the YouTube site, so that people could just go there and say, "We'll gather back in 13 minutes." And they'll know that. So, and so you'd actually, I've heard people say, okay, so it's 4:27 right now. We'll gather at 4:40. And so people will know when to expect their time back. Following that, we now go in your handbook. And by the way, in the handbook, it would be good if they have the handbook for you to draw their attention to the page where it has all the notes on there. So in this case, page 24 handbook is a good thing. And then that leads into more discussion. And this is the discussion about hell. And so we want them to go, we're going to open up into Mark 9. Now, one of the principles we try to emphasize in Christianity Explored is that for non-believers who would feel very uncomfortable reading the Bible because it's not familiar for them, you don't need to you can promise them that you're not going to ask them to read or pray or sing out loud or anything like that. So make sure you have either someone you're comfortable with being willing to read the passage, or you yourself read the passage. Better yet, put their passage on the screen and read it. That way a non-Christian doesn't have to deal with Bible words. Okay? The next part we have on here is just the questions on here, and all that stuff that Randy said is right there. Take your time going through the questions, and find out where people are at. And so that is, whoops, I'm going to go back a bit. That's basically, now there's more than 3 questions. This is just a sample, but that's how an evening goes. It's easy to spend a good hour there, just in opening up. They're open-ended questions, and the guide here of listening to people well and asking good follow-up questions is really the key to a Christianity Explored session. You don't have the meal, so it's a very simplified version. Any questions about running that?
I have a question. So when you go to the listen portion, you put the video on the leader's guide also, and as well as in the participant guide, underneath the listen, it has some like bullet points. Is that something you need to address or point out or read over after the video is played, or are they just there?
Those bullet points are the highlighted parts of his talk. So he says all of those. That's why it's ideal for them if you can give them a book for them to take notes in. A lot of times people will start writing, highlighting that portion of their notes because the bullets are there.
Yeah. Okay.
But I wouldn't go over it again because they've just heard it.
Okay.
Other questions?
And Kev, I know it may vary depending on the group and its size and who's in the group, but is there a particular amount of time or percentage of time that you would devote to the discussion before the video as opposed to after the video? So if you had an hour's worth of time that you've allotted to meet, how much of that time would you spend before the video, and how much of it would you spend after the video in discussion?
So like an evening like this, where we know the video is 13 minutes long, I would probably go 20 minutes on the beginning discussion. Then you got about 13 or 14 minutes of video. So you're at 35 minutes, and so then you can go 25 minutes towards the whole second section. Okay. And the second section in this one only has 3 questions.
Yeah.
So you could adjust it and say, okay, we're going to spend 25 minutes on the opening section and 20 minutes on those last 3 questions, and you could move ahead into some of the follow-up to get them a taste of what's coming up that week. So each week determined by how much content you have and how much you want to cover. So yeah, you'll get a feel for it as you're doing it, and you'll know your group, because some people, you'll get some groups where you could answer 3 questions in a minute and a half, and then it's kind of awkward because you got to really draw people out. And then, as you know, there's other groups where you're going to get through 2 questions in 25 minutes because people just love to talk. So,
yeah. Okay.
Oh, the baby just disappeared. So, good.
So to be clear, then the discussion after the video is not more important than the discussion before the video. It's not climactic,
it builds. It's building each week, but I would say it's as important. Okay. They're both in Mark. They're both establishing. The one before is kind of a follow-up from the week before, so it's pounding that point home.
Okay.
And then you're introducing the next point. So with this being week 3, we're moving from the point before was in weeks 1 and 2 was on the identity of Jesus. And so you see the question is, it's why can Jesus forgive sins? Because of his identity as the Son of God. That's what you're driving home. Now, you're transitioning in that week that, well, what does it mean for him to be the Son of God? It means he can forgive sins. So that was his mission in coming. So we've gone from identity to mission, and we see the purpose of the mission here in this passage in Mark 9, where we're seeing this is about hell. Why is it important to have our sins forgiven? Because Jesus believed in hell. What I love about this whole section here, too, by the way, is the issue isn't whether I believe in hell. It's, well, do you believe God will send a good person of another religion to hell? It doesn't matter what I believe. Here's what Jesus taught. Let's talk about what he believed. And this allows the issue to be, it's not a personal one between me and you. It's rather an opportunity for us to look at the text in an objective manner.
It's good.
Okay. Yeah, so yeah, you'll see both of them kind of deal with identity and mission because they overlap, because Jesus' mission only counts because of who he is. But you're seeing the transition there in that. So just knowing that is helpful. And like I said, you'll become more and more familiar. Other questions? Okay, now this last section you have, go ahead.
I was asking Jeannie if she had any questions. Dan, you got any questions?
Nope.
All right, you pass this off to, and feel free to pass this off to the rest of your team. And, you know, you guys can email or call me. We can work something out for a follow-up question. Or you go a week in and you got questions after starting and seeing how that is, that's fine too. This next section, there is a whole section in your notes, you probably noticed, with it fully fleshed out. And I'm just touching on this generally here. You all can read, but it's important for you to have these 3 expectations down so you understand what is going on in a Christianity Explored course and Life Explored course, any of these that we run. Dave can testify that having this for the long-term view is always healthy, because otherwise we build expectations out that, wow, you know, I'm going to run a Christianity Explored and everyone's going to come to Christ in this first time. Oftentimes that's not the way it works. I mean, God can do that, but have your expectations straight. First one, as you'll text, is in Mark 8, to expect disappointment. Guess what? Jesus' family kind of rejected him. His disciples disappointed him. If that is the case, we should not expect anything better than that. And quite frankly, you'll find people who will start the series with you and drop out for no reason, or promise to come and never show up. That disappointment happens. It happens all the time. Expect that. It does happen, and people will let you down. And so that's why we're relying on God, and he won't let you down, which means that he'll be doing a work. It might be the work he's doing in your own life as you're becoming more familiar with the material more than anything else. You might see Jesus in a fresh way, and that in itself would be a win. Expect delay. It oftentimes takes people multiple series to go through the course. I mentioned, you know, people who've taken the course many times, but for some, it's also they finish the series and they're meeting with you afterwards, and all of a sudden things start clicking. There's a delay factor. People don't grasp all of who Jesus is, why he came, and what it means to follow him right immediately or altogether. As is testimony in our own lives. Remember, we did that survey a couple weeks ago, or last week, of saying, did you understand his identity, mission, call all at once? You said no, none of it. And so expect delay. That was true of your life as well. Expect delay. But also then finally, expect dramatic results. The fun thing is this is God's word and his spirit are at work. We get to sit back and with expectation that God is somehow working in these lives, get to point people to Jesus. And as a result, dramatic results is found when people see Jesus for the first time, or even when Christians start seeing him afresh and say, boy, this really is good news. I'm excited about talking to my friends about Jesus. And so both take place all the time. So keeping that in mind allows you to say what we're building is something for the long run. So even if that means the one time you're running through the series, you're saying, what's one Christian friend I want to have with me as a kind of a co-leader, so that he or she can lead a series on their own the next time, or that he or she would build their confidence. It might take 3 or 4 times because you're kind of discipling them. Always think through what is the next step. These things don't fully bloom overnight. It takes time for a seed to get planted and grow and seed and then come up and bear fruit. And so what is the one next step you want to see take place this time? And so, for Foothills, it might be, if this is the first time running it, you're getting your people familiar with Mark and with the Christianity Explored series. That in of itself is a huge win in building it for the long run. Okay?
It's helpful.
All right. Well, that was what we covered last week, identity, mission, call. So that's what I have. Any questions overall on these webinars?
So you talked a little bit about time frame. Is 1 hour kind of the recommended session?
Yeah, I would think so in light of a webinar or web-based. If it goes longer because people are talking and that's good with them, great. If you're meeting in person, I would say allow 2 hours, just because you're doing a meal and people are in a different setting when you're across a living room or in a church building with someone with a meal. People are willing to give 2 hours. I think it's a little harder. Give me your feedback when you're through. I think we're aiming for an hour is probably a little bit better.
Oh yeah, because we're, I think, and Kevin, when you guys do it together, you're meeting together. Do you get into the explore part of the discussion at all during the mealtime, or do you eat a meal just hanging out, eating a meal?
A little bit of both, and a lot of times we'll start eating the meal, and a lot of times we'll review the follow-up section from the week before. With Christianity Explored. Life Explored doesn't have that component, but with Christianity Explored, we'll start reviewing a little bit of the week before. And regardless, you could look at the follow-up, or you could look at, say, hey, some of the people missed last week. Hey, you missed last week. Here's some highlights. You might want to review that, and then start getting into the new material. So you kind of, I encourage people, if they're eating a meal with somebody and you're having good discussion about what's going on in their lives, don't try to cut that too short because they're sharing with you. Get to know them because I don't know if anyone doesn't like being cared for and asked about how their life is going. So now that's a little bit harder. Now, so I would even encourage you online, if people are open, if we're changing the dynamics of the timelines around, if people are willing to talk about what's going on in their lives, maybe they want to talk about the COVID and how it's affecting their lives, and you're taking 10 or 15 minutes talking about how their lives are affected, great. Now adjust your timeline. Okay, so we're going to do 15 minutes on the first section. We'll do 13 minutes on the video, and we'll do 17 minutes of follow-up, and you're done in an hour. So feel free to make that work in an hour. And if people want to hang out for another 10 minutes afterwards, you can ask them at the end of the first week saying, hey, guys, this was packed. Do you guys mind going an hour and 10 minutes next week? And they'll probably say, sure.
Do you spend time in prayer with people in the large group?
Normally I don't, with because of non-believers. Prayer can be something they're not comfortable with. Usually until week 7, when you can offer them a sample prayer. We do spend time in prayer with our leaders ahead of time. We try to gather ahead of time and pray. But we try actually. We normally don't do a prayer in that meeting, just because for a non-Christian, they're not sure how to interact at that point with God. So.
Yeah. Do you guys have any other questions that would be helpful for not just us, but any of the other folks that would watch this later?
Well, I'll tell you what, while you're still thinking those through, I'm going to give you one more chance at a feedback. This is to everyone. The feedback form is slightly different from last week. And what this has on it is just a chance, if you want me to register you on the leader site. By the way, we got all the requests from last week. We'll send out the Finding More book to you as well, and get those in the mail to you. But if any of you want to be registered, just mark that on there as well. I took away the survey portion of how much you grew from week 1 to week 3. That part's not on there. It's like 3 or 4 questions on there. So feel free to fill that out, and that would be good. So, well, Cody, thank you for organizing this with Foothills and for having us in your state. It's good to be in Arizona right now, although it's about 70 degrees up here in Oregon. So
Nice.
I think it's actually been nicer here than in LA. You guys have been getting a lot of rain down there in LA, haven't you?
Yeah, that's right.
Hmm.
Today's nice.
Well, little sympathy from those of us in the Northwest. So
Thank you. Thank you. We need it. We need it.
Hey, thank you,
All right,
Kevin.
Cody. Yeah, why don't you close our time in prayer?
I will, and yeah, thank you again for taking the time to do all this and arranging for us to be able to meet online and get trained up to do this well.
That's a joy. I love it. So
Let me pray. Father, we are grateful for your work. We're grateful for your grace and your love to us in Christ, as we just thought about that and meditated on that as Good Friday's just passed, and then the resurrection as we celebrated that this past Sunday. Father, I pray that it would not just be something we celebrate once a year, obviously, but that we would keep it in the forefront of our mind, that we are live our lives in light of your grace and love to us in Christ and his death and in his resurrection. And I pray that we would find our hope only in the gospel of Christ and not in anything else. And I pray as we work hard to be laborers, to bring you glory, to be faithful servants of Christ, that as we strive to share the good news with people in Ahwatukee and in Phoenix, and as we really do it virtually, there's no bounds. So, Father, we're praying that as the gospel is explained by going through the Gospel of Mark, that people would be drawn to Christ, that you would convert them for your glory, and that we are thankful that you are sovereign, and that we can trust you to do your work and know that you're doing it for your pleasure and for your glory. And we pray this all in Jesus' name, amen.
And thank you, guys. I'm curious to hear how it goes. Let me know.
Yeah, Kevin, I'll stay in touch, man. I'll stay in touch and keep you posted on how things are going.
Great. Thanks.
Thanks for letting me join you guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you. All right.
Thanks.
I'll see you guys.
Take care.
Thank you.